to Ask the Patient Advocate podcast, where we will discuss all things related to navigating your health. I am Dr. Elena Barelli, and I'm so excited to talk about such an important topic of private patient advocacy. Managing your health and navigating the healthcare system is challenging, but it's a lot better when we go through it together. Welcome back to a new episode of Ask the Patient Advocate podcast. Navigating a medical diagnosis, especially something like cancer, can be very overwhelming. There's fear, uncertainty, and a whirlwind of decisions that need to be made in a very short time frame. One of those decisions may be, should I consider a clinical trial? Clinical trials are often overlooked, misunderstood, or even feared, but they can be an option that offers life-changing possibilities, sometimes even when all other options seems to have run out. So let's break it down and answer the most common questions that people have regarding clinical trials. Joining me today is Christine, a member of our team. Hi, Christine. How are you?
Hi, Dr. Relly. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm so excited to talk about clinical trials because I think this is the first episode that we talk about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's so important. A lot of people, don't really know where to start or if they consider it. And I also feel like a lot of times somebody will say to their provider, what about a clinical trial? And they often are like, oh yeah, there's not available, or oh, they just brush them off. And then, it kind of gives them a false or incorrect answer. So don't let that be the only time that you about it or learn about it.
I totally agree with you with that. So, Dr. Relly, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a clinical trial?
That's a great place to start. So, a clinical trial is a type of medical research study that involves human participants. That's kind of like a general definition. So, the goal is to test new treatments, medications, devices, or even a combination of these treatments to determine if they are safe and effective. Now, clinical trials are not always based on treatment. Sometimes it's just to study different symptoms and things like that. But a lot of times, if you are dealing with something like cancer, you're really looking at trials that offer like a treatment option and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today because that's really the clinical trials that we most often are familiar with and help our patients with. So when we talk about clinical trials, there's 4 phases, each with a specific objective, from safety to effectiveness and long-term outcomes.
So, if someone is in clinical trial, they may get access to treatments that aren't widely available yet.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest benefits. It can mean accessing innovative care that still is in research phase and not yet FDA approved for general use, but it's being monitored closely with strict safety protocols. That's important to understand because there's a lot of potential benefits of trying a clinical trial depending in what situation you're currently in.
I got you. So this is a big one. A lot of people hear trial and immediately, think experimental or unsafe. How do you respond to that?
It's a very valid concern for sure. But the truth is, clinical trials in the United States follow extremely strict guidelines to protect participants. So trials go through an approval process that has clearly defined eligibility criteria and include regular monitoring. Patients can usually withdraw at any time if they feel uncomfortable. The key is really making sure you understand the trial completely before participating. And that's something that we help a lot with our clients is understanding kind of what they're getting into so that they can make the decision if they want to participate or not.
I got you. Well, now let's talk about, money because everything is money, right? So, are clinical trials covered by insurance?
So, interestingly enough, many people are surprised to learn that most insurance plans, including Medicare and Medicaid, do cover costs associated with clinical trials. But navigating the paperwork and the approval process can be confusing. And that's really where a private patient advocate can really step in to help. And again, just to side note this, that private patient advocate is different from the advocate that you're going to receive from maybe your health insurance policy or a hospital system. They are
Exactly.
not going to be as widely knowledgeable about these protocols and so forth. And, I can't tell you how many times we've had clients where they say, my insurance told me, or my healthcare facility said that I am not covered. I don't have proper coverage for this clinical trial. And so many times that ends up not being the case. So if you have heard that, don't just automatically assume that's the final answer. A lot of times it's just kind of miscommunication or misunderstanding of the policy, etc. There's definitely ways to work around that. But let me get back to the question. Sorry. But navigating the paperwork and approval process can be very confusing. And that's really where we help. If a trial isn't covered, there may still be financial assistance available. So don't let the finances stop you from exploring this option.
That is so important. So many people assume not covered means, no way, right? Where in reality, there may be a way forward. So now let's talk about outcomes. Are clinical trials worth the time and uncertainty?
Absolutely. But for many clinical trials have been game changing. Wait, let me go back. Absolutely. For many, clinical trials have been game changers, leading to remission or better quality of life, or all of the above, when other treatments weren't working. Of course, results aren't guaranteed, but the opportunity to try something new, especially in cases where options are limited, can bring so much hope.
Right, right. So I think this is a tricky question. Can people just ask their doctor, about clinical trials? Will their doctor know what's out there?
So they can. Some doctors may know about certain trials, especially if they're affiliated with a research hospital. But the reality is that there are hundreds of thousands of trials globally, and most providers don't have access to or time to keep up with them all. That's where having someone like a private patient advocate is so helpful. We can search databases, connect with trial coordinators, and guide patients through the process and really let them know like what trials are actually available.
Right. Well, so if someone is listening and thinking of, getting a clinical trial and might be, the right way for their loved ones, where do they even begin?
Great question. Start by reaching out to a private patient advocate like ourselves. Um, we can help you at Pathway Patient Advocates. We'll help you understand your options, research relevant trials, and guide you through qualifications, paperwork, communication with the providers. Clinical trials can be intimidating, but they don't have to be. And you don't have to navigate it alone. Let us do all the difficult work so that you can kind of focus just on your quality of life and, feeling asymptomatic let me just scrap that, huh? Let us do the work so that you don't have to deal with it.
Amazing. Well, this was such a great conversation, Dr. Borelli, and I hope our listeners feel more, empowered to ask about clinical trials because I know that will definitely help them, throughout their healthcare or journey.
Agreed. If you or a loved one is navigating a serious diagnosis, know this: there are options. You deserve to know them, and you deserve to support. Ugh. You deserve to know them, and you deserve support in pursuing them.
Very well said, Dr. Borelli. For anyone looking for help for themselves or for their loved ones, how can they reach out?
It's easy. Reach out to Pathway Patient Advocates and we can help you. You can give us a call. Our main number is 947-517-8395. And regardless of where you live, we can start helping you. You can also send us an email at advocate@pathwaypa.com, or visit our website online at www.pathwaypa.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Borelli.
Of course. Thank you, Christine. It's a pleasure as always. I hope this conversation helps our listeners feel more confident as they navigate their healthcare journey. Bye. If you have a question for Ask the Patient Advocate, email advocate@pathwaypa.com. Managing your health and navigating the healthcare system is challenging, but it's a lot better when we go through it together.